is Miss Hurst and welcome to my video on how to design a poster. So first of all I'm going to show you the typical poster that as a teacher we would have handed in if we set this as a task. Usually the object that the poster is advertising or describing will be in the centre of the page. So if you were creating a poster to show a bag, we would have a bag that is drawn in the middle of the page like this. And quite often that item will be drawn in pen. So if you were to make any mistakes or do anything wrong, there's no way that you can rub that out or change it. So first mistake is using pen to start your drawings. Next we'd have a title at the top of the page, so that would just be written like so. So bag, we might have an underline without a ruler. We'd have some information about the bag, and that would go around the edge of the page. So we'd have some info here, might have some info here, maybe some info here. So it looks a little bit like a mind map. I mean, that's what makes a poster, isn't it? Right? If we have any colour at all, which we may or may not have, then quite often the colour hasn't been added very carefully. So we might have a little bit here, like this. And as you can see, that there is bad colouring in. That is not good colouring in. We're not inside the lines and we're not totally filling that area with the colour, so there's no white gaps. I can see white gaps in that bit there. That doesn't count as colouring in. Now I've gone through the typical poster that we would have handed in. I'm now going to go through what I recommend you do for a high quality outcome and the best results. So you must start by collecting together all of the equipment that you need. We need a plain piece of paper. You may have some coloured paper at home, but I would suggest that it is plain white paper, because this means that when you add the colour is true to whatever you've chosen to use and doesn't become muddy with whatever the background colour of the page is. So plain white paper is best. You can decide whether you're going to be working portrait or landscape. Most of the time posters are produced portrait. I believe this is because we generally write in books this way round, so if we are asked to do another piece of work, then it is just, we think about just getting it and putting it in front of us in the same way that we would work on most of our tasks. But switch things up a little bit and you might want to turn the page around. Next we need to get yourself a pencil. You can use just a normal HB pencil like this, must be sharp, or if you have one you could use an engineering pencil, which is one of these ones here, which you fill with lead and you would push forward so the lead comes out of the top of the pencil. This one here doesn't require any sharpening and means that the line that you draw is the same width at all times, but it doesn't matter which type of pencil you have. You need a ruler. We can't always draw everything correct the first time, so make sure you've got a ruler to hand so you can rub out any mistakes or any of your construction lines that I'll move on to in a moment. Next we need some colour, so that can be colouring pencils or it could be colouring pens. If you have both, feel free to use both, because you can mix up colouring pencils and colouring pens in your design. The last thing that you need to get is a black pen. You can, if you have them available, use a black writing pen or fine liner, so something that has been produced specifically for lining around your artwork. If you don't have any of these, that's totally fine. A black biro that you use to write in school, that does the job absolutely fine. So if you don't have a specific fine liner pen, then just grab yourself a black biro and we will still get great results. Once you have all of your items together, the next part is for you to start marking out. There are 4 stages to making a poster, so stage number 1 is the marking out, and this is where we decide where our object of the poster is going to be. So before I showed how to draw a typical poster and I had a bag and I put that right in the centre of the page. But think about it, it doesn't have to be right in the middle. You could, for example, put your object over to one side. So we could have a bag here in the corner like this, And you see how lightly I'm drawing. I'm not sure if you can even see this on the page, so I'll draw a little bit harder so you can see on the camera. And you could have it opening out so that we could have some writing coming out of the bag and spilling out onto the page here. If you are creating a poster that is a research poster about an object or something in history, you might have a character or somebody that you are researching, and you might have them somewhere on this page. So again, you could have them in a corner, somewhere over here, and you could have them even speaking, so we could have a speech bubble, or we could have them thinking. So if they're thinking, it tends to be a cloud, so it's like a thought cloud, or a light bulb. So if somebody that came up with an idea or a design, you could have that character in there too. But what we're doing with our pencil is we are working really, really lightly. I've had to press a little bit harder than I would normally so that you can see it on the screen. But normally I would be marking out with what we call construction lines, or sometimes we know it as shadowing, and that is because we're doing it so lightly. If we made a mistake, we've got our rubber ready and we'd be able to rub this out and we could start again, no problem, because your lines can completely disappear and you can move it. So if you made changes to your design as you're going along, it's not a problem because you can make those changes really very easily. Next, while we are marking out, we're going to think about where our information is going to go around the page. And you might want to put some shapes in ready for this. So you might want to make squares, you might want to make stars, you might want to make clouds. Whatever you'd like to do, you can start adding in areas that you are going to put your information. So I'm going to put a square just here, and that is where one lot of information is going to go. And then I'm going to put maybe an oval shape down here. That is where another lot of my information is going to go. And then we need to think about the titles. Really important that we mark out where our title is going to go so that we don't end up with larger letters at the start, and then as we run out of space, our letters, as we get over to the edge of the page, can get smaller and smaller as we try to fit them in. The easiest way for you to do this is to mark this out with squares. If you have a ruler handy, you might wish to do this really, really accurately. Measure your page, think about how many centimetres or millimetres you would like your letters to be, and then you can draw squares per letter. Or, if you have quite a good eye, you might want to do this freehand. So I'm going to go for bag again, just because it is a short word, and I've decided that my title is going to be right in the centre of my page here. So I've drawn, and I'm going to make it harder again than I would normally so you can see, a square, and I'm going to split that square into three. That is for each of the three letters that make up the word bag, so that when I then add the letters inside the squares, like so, it means that each letter is the same size. I'm doing this in capitals, and that means that when you've drawn your bubble writing or your big title, they look equal in size, and it looks like it's been intended to go there, and you've thought about its placement in relation to everything else on the page. Once you have marked out where everything's going to go, so for example, you've got your title, you've got your areas, you're going to put your information, you've got some pictures of the object that you are advertising or showing on your poster, then you will be ready to start adding some details. Details are extra bits on top of these construction lines that you've marked out. So I'm going with the bag because I have it on here in front of me. If there were some stitching or some parts of this particular bag that you could use to add extra design details, you could start adding those in now. So for example, if the bag handle was made with a chain effect, you might decide that you want to add some chain as part of the design. So I might put some chain underneath my title here so that it underlines it with something that is relevant to the subject that I'm doing. If you are designing a poster on another subject, for example glass, You could think about where glass is used and what it's used for, and each of these areas that are used for information to go in could be the shape of an object that is made of glass. So for example, I could have a glass bottle down here, and when it comes to adding information, I could add that onto the label of the glass bottle there. So think about the subject and think about how it's going to look on the page. So I've got my glass bottle, and my glass bottle is actually going to be bursting out, and that is where my title comes from. Kind of a little bit of a mix of things on this page now, because I'm talking about glass, I've got a glass bottle, and then I've got the title bag. But you can see how it's developing on my page and it's becoming quite interesting. If you were designing a poster that is something to do with textiles, you might have some stitching on there. So you might want to add some running stitch, so we could add some little stitched lines over here, and we might have some thread there, and we might have a needle that's been threaded. There's my needle here, and there's my stitch line, and you might have some more thread coming down here like so. Again, you can see that I'm filling in with the details and adding in little bits here and there in the gaps that I have available. So that is stage 2. We now also need to start adding in our information. So if you're doing a research task, you should have information ready to go in, and this is the stage that you would start adding it in to those areas that you have highlighted for the information and the writing to go. You may want to do it in pencil first and then go over it in pen, or if you are quite confident that you have quite neat handwriting, get out your black pen, the biro or the fine liners, whichever you're deciding to use, and at this point, this is when you would start writing information in here. Now I'm doing squiggles because this poster is a little bit of a mix of random things, bags, glass bottles, but also because it would make this video really long if I was to actually write any information in there whilst you're watching me. So I'm writing it in here, I'm going to write it around here. Remember as well, this page can move, so rather than writing around here with your hand at a bit of a funny angle, turn the page, and that means it makes it easier for you to write at an angle, and then you can just turn it back when you're ready. So I've got one more box here to write some very interesting facts in. There we go, and that is the end of stage 2, which is the adding the details. Stage 3 is adding our colour. So I personally prefer to use colouring pencils, but it depends what you have available and what you prefer for your poster. And when we're adding colour, there's 2 ways that you can add colour to make it look good quality. You can either do one direction colouring, and that is where, as it says, you are colouring in one direction and one direction only. So staying inside those lines, I am only colouring in this diagonal direction here. I've got my hand rested on the page, so it is not awkward and it's quite comfortable. And I'm going to start adding in inside the lines, making sure that I'm filling the space with the colour. I'm not leaving behind any white spaces. This is also the stage you might find you need to remove some of your construction lines. So here, because I did draw boxes around, I'm going to remove those extra lines there so that it leaves just my letters nice and neatly in the middle there. So that's my first colour. So that was one direction colouring in. Another way that you can colour in that works quite well is doing it in little circles. So I've got my nice sharp pencil here, I'm going to start in the corner, and rather than going in lines, you can see the end of my pencil is working in little circles, and I'm filling it in, working in circles, and that means that there won't be any lines on the page because I'm not going in any direction. I'm working in circles, and there's no lines in circles. And you can fill in this way. This way takes slightly longer, but if you find that sometimes if you are colouring in one direction you tend to go over the lines, you don't quite have enough control over how long your lines are when you're colouring, then you might find this way, although it takes longer, is neater and gives you better results. So that is little circles, which is the second way that you could use to colour in. So that's adding your colour. If you have both colouring pencils and felt tip pens available to you, this is when you might want to mix them up a little bit and use both. So you can see that I've started colouring in my title there, 2 colours. Because I have both of them, I've gone for orange for the B, so I'm going to get an orange felt tip and I'm going to add some orange lines around just some areas on the B there. It's a bit like a shadow. And then the next one, the A, I used pink, so I've got a red felt tip, and again I'm going to add in just a few little lines, a bit like a shadow on the side there. It makes an interesting effect. Once you've added colour everywhere, and I mean everywhere, no white spaces left, you can even use a very pale colour pencil, and if you have it nice and sharp on its side, so nice and flat on the page, so whereas before I held the pencil quite close to the end, now if you have it quite flat on the page like this, you can shade really quickly like this and fill in any areas that have not yet been coloured. So you can have a nice colourful background really quickly using the side of the pencil like this. Again, I'm not sure if you can totally see, so I'm going to lift this up and hope that you can see some yellow, maybe. There we go. Okay, so once the colour's added, we're on to our 4th and final stage, and that is the fine lining or the outlining. So you take your pen, and I am going to go for the biro, because as I said, totally fine to just use a biro if you don't have a fine liner, and we're just going to go round all the lines to make them really stand out on the page. This last stage really does finish off your poster and make everything really stand out. Can you see how much that is standing out on the camera here in comparison to before I fine lined? So obviously you can see I've not finished colouring, so it would take hours for me to finish this with you watching. Joking, it doesn't take that long. But it does take a little while to make a good quality finished poster. It's not a quick task to make something that is high quality standard that you can be proud of. Once you have finished with your fine lining, going around every single piece that you have drawn, that is when your poster is finished and ready to hand in. Make sure that your information is clearly written and makes sense and is written in your own words. We're not just copying from Wikipedia. Any teacher can log on to Wikipedia and read that for themselves. What we're looking for is for you to go and research and go and think carefully about the layout of your design, the information that your design is including, and how you are presenting that information on the page in an exciting, interesting and creative way. And that is how to design a poster with me, Miss Hurst. Thank you very much for watching.